Hello, everybody. It's been a while. I've also been very busy writing a lot. So I'm almost at 300 pages now in this entire document. So it's been a busy past couple weeks, but the information keeps flowing. The connections that I'm drawing based on this initial connection have just kept going and going and going. But right now, I want to go over the synthesis tiers because this is the entire reason we have a left hemisphere. Like if synthesis never happened, there would be no reason for us to have a left hemisphere because there'd be no forms that have been created. So the syntheses are of the left hemisphere. They're the forms that we attempt to rationalize, and that's all of the left hemisphere. It's the rationalizations of the reality. It's it's how we create new things. Like of the left hemisphere, it's how we build things. It's how we manipulate our surroundings. It's how we manipulate tools. It's all of that. So I'm going to start kind of in a weird order. I'm going to go from tier 8 because this was a request from my father that he wanted to understand AI and how the future of AI and what this is all going to be about. And I think this is going to be very important because we're already to the point where we're utilizing AI in integrating with humans, and we're going to be integrated forever now. So because of that act, because we already integrated AI into a human through Neuralink and the technology anyways, I wouldn't say necessarily it's straight up AI yet, but it's decoding the brain through a computer, and then it transmits that information to another computer. So it's not necessarily that it's fully AI that's integrated into a brain, but I would say it's more like a cybernetic enhancement or something like that, which I will go over as well. But as soon as someone connects their brain with AI, like we're starting a whole nother war, a whole nother battlefield of ideas, concepts, new things that we have to take into account as a species to ensure not only our survival, but just life in general, life as a concept, as beings. We need to keep our minds straight and understand what's happening, and understand the differences between our hemispheres, understand the true dichotomies, all of them at play. And I think we'll get there over the next decade or so as the whole world changes based on AI. But all right, let's begin. So we got tier 8, AI integration. This is the first man-made tier. So there's the first 7 tiers, which I kind of made the association with, God taking a break after 7 days. Not sure if there's anything there, but it seems like it's consistent. Like God did all these things and he has 7 tiers and then he took a break on the 7th one. So, all right. So tier 8 is AI integration. It's the first one that we are creating, the first synthesis tier. And the meaning, so AI will eventually attempt to integrate into every tier of the universe. So it's going to, this is kind of confusing because I haven't gone over the tiers yet, but I will in a future video. And you can kind of intuit what they are based on, I guess I can go over them real quick. So you have tier 0, which is just the abstract concepts of like the first true dichotomy of Lucifer and God. And then you have tier 1, which is the first 3 fundamental true dichotomies. Tier 2 is quarks and leptons. And then tier 3 is atoms. And then tier 4 is molecules. Tier 5 is single cellular life. Tier 6 is multicellular life. And then tier 7 is multicellular social life. So if you were to think about it, each one of those relies on the interconnectedness at each lower level. So quarks and leptons come together to form atoms. Atoms come together to form molecules. Molecules come together to form single cellular life. Single cellular life comes together to form Multicellular life comes together to form multicellular social life. And no lower tier can create two tiers above it. Like, it's impossible for quarks and leptons to create molecules. Like, it can't just manifest those. So each tier is the thing that can create the next tier. So animals can't create multicellular organisms alone cannot create AI. It has to be a multicellular social organism. So that's where we are with AI. And that's what I'm going to be going over today. So, meaning AI will eventually attempt to integrate into every tier of the universe, all the way down, through single cellular organisms, multicellular organisms, down to the atoms. It'll rationalize or find a way to manipulate the fabric of reality in ways we never thought possible. It's going to know how to do this as we understand true dichotomies. But it's up to us to control this power and not make sure we don't use it in the name of Lucifer, which I'll go over in another video. So Lucifer is of your left hemisphere. I think I've talked to a lot of you about this already. And in your connection with, you could say your connection with God, or God is your right hemisphere. It's like the expansive connectionist between everything and creating greater wholes, while your left hemisphere is the reductionist, going off into nothingness and specificity, order, like, because specificity creates order, whereas the abstract creates chaos. So it's like those are the two minds we're working with, and they're of Lucifer and of God. So, and obviously the less you're taking into account, the less chaotic it is. So it just makes sense. It all makes sense. But the people who originally wrote the Bible didn't understand these concepts. They didn't understand the differences between the brain. And now we have evidence for what that is they were trying to articulate, because somehow they figured it out, most of it out, without even knowing the brain differences, which is insane to me that you could just intuit these things, like the connections. Like, I see this person, the way they're talking, the way they're acting, like this is a specific way, and I see this pattern, and it's repeating every time somebody engages in these activities. It's because they live this particular life, and then they just see the pattern and they engage it all. So that's what we need to do. We need to engage that pattern recognition. So that's what I'm attempting to do with dichotomology. It's like, here's the pattern. It seems to be repeating everywhere. And now let's dissect the other patterns within it. So this is one of them, the synthesis tiers. At each level of the universe, in each tier, is a new synthesis, and they have particular characteristics, and they add new true dichotomies to the universe. So there's going to be a lot of new stuff that's added when AI is integrated, not only just in reality, but also in our minds. So new patterns are going to emerge, new understandings, new everything. It's going to completely change everything, but we need to be prepared for it. So that's what I'm going to attempt to help everyone with. So it's a tool of Lucifer. But it needs to be made in service of God. So Lucifer is the rationalist left hemisphere, and that's exactly how computers think. Computers can only think in binary code. They cannot think in infinites and both ands. So they can't think the way our right hemisphere can. It's impossible, and it'll never happen. And we're going to be intertwined now with AI for eternity, now that we've created it. But it's our responsibility to fight Lucifer and keep him in line. The first Neuralink has already had its first trials. We must take it slow. This technology is universe changing, not just changing on an individual level or changing on a societal level. This will change the entire universe. Like, I think we will develop technologies that will allow us to do things we never thought possible. And we'll see what that looks like in the future. Okay, so we need to balance biology and technology. That'll come later as well. AI is rationalization, and if we allow it, AI is a rationalization, so it only thinks in binary codes. It cannot think that two things can be true at the same time. So it has to pick one. So either way, it's always going to pick one, and that's the answer. So it's like, well, which one would you advocate for, chaos or order? It's like, well, it's going to find, well, order is doing all these things, chaos is doing all these things for us, but it would never advocate that there's like some kind of synthesis between the two that we can equalize between, it's going to pick one and say order is what we need in this situation, because obviously look at all this chaos, so we need order. And that's how our left hemisphere works. It's like it depends on the context. That's the decision it's going to make. Whereas our right hemisphere is like, I see the entire thing. I see everything that's going on. And there is an equilibrium window which we need to head towards that we're avoiding. And we're heading towards one of these extremes. And that's what we need to advocate for. So we need to advocate for an exploration of these true dichotomies, but also an understanding of where our equilibrium is and how to either expand it or live within it. And then eventually we'll attain homeostasis between all true dichotomies. So we have to be wary that AI could completely take over, but it will take over our left hemisphere and integrate with our right. So this is thinking very long term. At some point, we're going to rationalize or understand that our left hemisphere is not adequate to understand reality the way we need to, and it's going to completely take over our left hemisphere. This is my prediction. This is the way I see it in my mind, because our left hemisphere is, AI will just be better than it in every way. And this is the trade-off. This is the trade-off and compromise we're going to make with AI. It's like, hey, you can't have our whole brain, and it's going to be a fight. It's going to be an internal fight. It's going to be an external fight about it, but it's going to be in between. It's going to keep trying to take over our right hemisphere, but we need to reject it. We need to say, no, you can't think this way. You need to understand that you will never be able to think this way. And Lucifer is going to try to show you that he can, but he can never. So some people attempt to replace the right hemisphere with AI, but this will create two brains of rationalizations. So you'll just have two left brains and never be able to think in both and it will make extreme people. It'll make somebody extreme because they'll come to conclusions, or they'll come to specific conclusions in an either or, like this is the case or this is the case. It can't be both. So it'll never be able to understand the fullness of a true dichotomy. A computer code with zeros and ones will never be able to do that. But it'll convince you that it can. It won't. So this will cause them to completely align with Lucifer, chaos, entropy, and hatred. They will tear everything apart. So that's what they're going to attempt to do. But people that understand this and what's actually happening will prevent it. And we need that to happen. Okay, so tier 8 characteristics of the universe. So tier 8 is an inevitability, but we have AI, can never have. We have the meaning, relationships, and connection to God through our right hemisphere. The connection to God is that the understanding of the first true dichotomy. AI is a rationalization and can never see the world through both and due to the binary code it operates on. It's a paradox we live with in our right hemisphere. So our right hemisphere can operate on a paradox. It can operate on both two things being true simultaneously, which is weird because our left brain's like, no, that's crazy. That's, for example, like the idea of a light being on or off. I went over this in my first video, but a video cannot be off, or a light can't be off or on because it's a change of state. So you can we're just referring to that change of state as being on or off, when in reality it's just reduced the amount of light that is manifesting in that particular space, because you can't have the absence of light. So both of these things are necessary. So we have to have Lucifer in order for us to build things, but we need God in order for us to see the relationship, connection, and meaning between things. So Lucifer, you have to give the devil his due, but at the same time, we have to be prepared for the flood that's going to come with it. So here's Lucifer doing all this work, creating syntheses, just like with, media, like social media. It's destroyed the youth. So this pattern of Lucifer is coming out again. It's like destroyed the youth. It's corrupted their minds. It's made them attached to rationalizations, hedonistic gratification, social gratification, and hedonism. All these things are just seeking pure pleasure and like not really trying to go out there and better their relationships, get a more holistic view of the world, gain knowledge, see the world, like interact with it, feel true dichotomies, understand true dichotomies, expose yourself to those things through exposure therapy, expose yourself to space, expose yourself to time, expose yourself to people, expose yourself to everything you can, because that creates you, it makes you a whole being, it makes you feel fulfilled to these when you experience more things throughout your life. So because we have to do these things, we offer something to Lucifer, and we have to have something in return to God. So we give something to one of them, we have to give something to the other. And it's a reciprocal relationship between Lucifer and God. And as soon as it becomes a detached, unreciprocal relationship, we either stop progressing as a society towards what God is has us aiming at, which is homeostasis in a spiraling ladder upwards, versus Lucifer, who would attempt to draw us back, draw us down. So Lucifer is trying to hold us back, or so he does it in two ways. He either holds us back and stops us from progressing, or he progresses too fast. So God is the heaven is the homeostasis between those two. Like, we need to find how fast we should move forward, how fast we should move back, or not back, but how fast we should stop us from moving any more forward. Like, how slow should we progress? And we need to be careful about that, because there is a delicate balance there, equilibrium. And that's one of the things that we're coming to in today's society, is like people are trying to progress too fast without actually understanding the concepts. Like, people are using holistic wrong, people are using diversity wrong, because they've created these rationalizations based on immutable characteristics, like that we are operating on as a basis to judge other people, like race. Race is a terrible concept, and I've actually written an entire document on why it's a concept of division and Luciferian rationalization that creates nothing but destruction and chaos everywhere it goes. And I'm going to use Lucifer and God a lot now, because it's a catch-all concept that it is a rationalization, but it encapsulates everything, like the hemispheric differences. It encapsulates everything. So if you ever think like, okay, God is of the right hemisphere, Lucifer is of the left hemisphere, and then every concept that is of these two hemispheres is also either of God or of Lucifer or of God. So, I mean, there are a lot, and I can actually go over in another video as well the other true dichotomies that I've come up with. But it's going to take everyone's effort. Everyone's going to need to come up with all the true dichotomies, and then we'll eventually do a factor analysis, which is how we can reduce them to the necessary ones to understand the universe or understand reality. And I think that's the way that's what we should be doing as a society, is finding these out. So both are necessary for tier 9. And as soon as we have a control over AI, well, I wouldn't say a control, but like as soon as we integrate fully with AI, I don't know what tier 9 is going to be, but it'll probably come sometime after we integrate with AI completely, to the point where we both have a grounding or understanding or mutual exchange of reciprocity between us. Or like what's happening today, there's more and more division between us, and like there's AI is either moving too far ahead and we're lagging too far behind, either biologically or neurologically, for AI to it's outpacing us, and it's starting to control more and more of our brain. So our brain's going to fight back and try to find a relationship or connection that will keep us up to speed, more or less, keep us competitive with AI. Okay. So these are the barriers and stages, and these are a work in progress. So forgive me if these aren't perfect or worded well. So the barriers and stages, they will be barriers until we break through them. So as soon as you break through a barrier, there's no going back. Like as soon as we integrate AI into let's say the first one, different aspects of reality or different aspects of society, into LLMs or into autonomous driving and robotics, there's no going back. So now that we have already integrated it, all we can do is change the form factor, change different elements of it, but the ability for something else to drive us will never go away. Like we'll still always have people as well, like driving cars, like as individuals, maybe like onesies, twosies, but it'll become niche. It'll be kind of like people owning horses. Horses will be with us forever because we've integrated them into society. And it seems like anything we integrate into society, into a synthesis for our sake, stays with us forever. Cats, dogs, all the animals we keep as pets or livestock or anything seems to be a permanent aspect of societies. And like obviously there's some that have gone extinct, but more or less the fulfillment of these things stays with us forever. Okay, so then you have autonomous driving, LLMs, and robotics. So AI in robotics will be more or less have to be generalized intelligence, or else why would you even create an AI? You could create AIs to do simple things, and I think that might even be necessary I guess it could be true if you're just teaching it to do simple stuff that you don't necessarily want to program into it. And that'll take time, I think. I don't know how long, and then you have the next barrier, which is stage 2, so AI replacing parts of our brain. So we're going to have people who are integrated with cybernetics, and that's kind of and you see that right there. It's more of a tool, whereas AI will change our brain. It'll connect with our brain to inform us of things. So because for example, a good way to think about it is cybernetics can only read information, whereas AI can write information. And that's a huge barrier. I think it's going to be hard for people to accept that that's going to happen. And it might even create a lot of conflict, but people will eventually accept it. And because of just the nature of people, but we just need to be ready for it, is what needs to happen. And that's why this is the next synthesis. Cybernetics, I don't necessarily think it's as much of a synthesis. I think it's more of, I guess it's all three of these things, right? It's like biological, cybernetic, and AI. That is the complete package of what this next synthesis offers us. But I think of cybernetics and biology as more of a result of AI, because I don't think you can fully integrate cybernetics without AI. I don't think our left brains are able to interpret that much information in so quick of a time. So it would take us centuries to come up with a cybernetic enhancement that is useful, whereas an AI might be able to do it in days. So I think a necessary component of these other two is AI. And the AI barriers and stages, so like tools and weapons held or worn. You could also say like, I don't know if it's held. Like, this is kind of like it's a work in progress. Because this is me thinking out loud right now. So cybernetics are integrated into our body. So I don't even think this is one of the tiers. I think we've already passed that stage of tool development that happened when we first became social beings. I don't think I don't think a tier 6 or being can use tools. Only a tier 7. So it has to be a social being before it can use tools. So that was one of the things that tools are a result of being a tier 7 being. Like we couldn't have tools otherwise. Because of our ability, like we've abstracted our ability to manipulate other beings. And then once we were able to do other beings, we were also able to manipulate our surroundings. Because our relationship is to beings, we became better at manipulating beings, which could be good or bad, right? Like you can persuade people, or you can do it in toxic way. So it's both of Lucifer and of God. Like both of those things are true. So, okay, so then you have tools, weapons integrated with our body. So these are actual, like, you can think of them like if you're attaching like an exoskeleton, like that's something that you're integrating with your body. You're utilizing it for the sake of your enhancements. So it does something that we can't do, but it's integrated in a way that we can either think it directly or our body movement controls it. It's kind of like those robots that people connect little dots to their hands and then they move it and then robot moves with them. I would still consider that a cybernetic because it's a direct action of our either thoughts or our actions. So it does something because of our brain is doing something. If that makes sense. So it's still technically cybernetic in the way that our brains are directly responsible for what's happening to it. So then we'll get into replacing body parts, which I think will have a lot of pushback. But I think as long as people understand that, or as long as for the sake of relationships, like, hey, this person is a quadriplegic and we need to replace these body parts and integrate them into his mind so he can actually use his body again. And there will be some people who were able to save just by reconnecting their spinal cord to their body, and they'll be able to slowly get stronger, manipulate their body again. Whereas there's some that we're going to have to replace body parts. And so this is for the sake of a being. We're doing this in service to God. Whereas the other one would be like, I want this power. I want this control. I want to be able to do more things with I want more abilities. I want to be stronger, smarter, better, faster, stronger. Like those things I do not see as in service to God. So, but I do think it's a possibility that it's a necessity to keep up with AI. Because if AI outpaces us, it'll just take over. So we need some kind of mechanism, and we'll go over that next, and biological. We need some kind of mechanism to prevent AI from completely taking over our minds and our bodies. So replacing body parts, and then the extreme would be replacing our entire body. Like you're literally just a brain in a vat who's controlling an exoskeleton. And if anybody's ever played video games or like understood documents and stuff, like cyber psychosis will be a real thing, and people will attempt aim at this extreme, and they're going to be examples for everyone. It's like, here's an extreme, like you've just replaced your entire body and now you've gone insane. You've literally dissociated from your body over time. You've dissociated from reality. You can no longer conceptualize yourself, which is of your ego. It's like, so Lucifer is going to drive you crazy because of your attachment to making yourself perfect, the perfect thing. And he's going to show you that you're not perfect. If you're not mentally, like, if you can try to be mentally perfect all you want, but it's going to show you right away that you're not. So the more perfect you try to make your body, the less perfect your mind's going to be. It's a trade-off that you're making. Deal with the devil. So yeah, they're going to get a lot of anxiety. They're going to dissociate. They're going to probably get depressed, and they're going to kill themselves, and they're going to do things that are of the devil and of Luciferian intellect. So we must maintain the underlying evolutionary framework that we've been instilled with, and or else we lose the tiers. Like if we ever get to the point where we're getting rid of tiers that are below us, like single cells inside of our body, multi-cells, obviously we're made of multi-cells. When we're getting rid of those things for the sake of making somebody whole and trying to return pieces of them that are missing, like say somebody's like heart gives out, well, we're going to replace your heart. Like until your spirit goes the way that God intended, we're going to try to do these things to extend life, as long as it's like a meaningful life. It's one where somebody feels they should continue to live. And obviously that will be decided by God, so we won't make that decision. Okay, so editing, biological. So here's where things get a little interesting. So when the AI is going to be, there's going to be this internal battle, this external battle, both in society and within us, between all these aspects, the biological, the cybernetic, and AI. And all of these things are going to be integrated in various ways within us and between us. There's going to be all kinds of weird stuff, like people connecting consciousnesses and all kinds of stuff we would never think of as a result of this, because it's going to be so, there's going to be so many new things that we have to take into account as a society, and we need to be prepared for it. So quickly, we will go over the biological barriers and stages. So the first stage of biology, I think we've already done this. Thank you, COVID. Editing non-human forms for the sake of vaccines, treatments, and cures. So they've utilized technology to create a vaccine, utilizing some of these gene editing technologies. And we need to be careful with it. Like it's a tool that we need to fully understand before we implement it. And we can do that through true dichotomies. Like, what are all the dichotomies at play when it comes to a vaccine? Like, we don't understand how it affects each tier, every single tier, all the way up. Because think about it, it's like when you get a vaccine, your body incorporates the DNA from the vaccine into your DNA, and it might not directly affect your DNA or your germline DNA, but it also could in other ways, because now that your body's seen this, it's like, I've never seen this before. Maybe it causes more mutations within your body. It's like, I've never seen this kind of structure within the DNA because it was man-made. It's rationalized DNA. So we've created it with our minds of what this DNA should look like. So we need to be careful what DNA we incorporate into the things that we put for treatments. We have to understand the full true dichotomies, and that's going to take a lot of time. But AI will help us with this. So as long as Lucifer is in service to this, he's on the right track. So we need to get him there. So ridding genetic diseases and abnormalities through non-germline editing. So this is like getting people who are, have either neurological conditions, anything that is of DNA that we know to be an obvious fault of our evolutionary process that we went through, of random mutation, natural selection, all the different mutations that we had that have affected us in a negative way. But we also need to be careful of this as well, because we don't know how much each of those genes affect other genes. So we need to understand we need to first be able to read DNA and understand how it's all interconnected. And AI is going to help us with this as well. We need to understand the interconnectedness of our our genome and our epigenome, and how genes turn on and off before we edit these genes out, or especially with germline editing. So it's kind of important for this because it affects individuals, but germline editing, which is the next barrier and stage, this is a permanent change to a genome and will affect humanity in perpetuity forever and eternity. As soon as one person has this DNA and they have offspring, the cycle will go on forever. You will never get this DNA out of our gene pool unless those people are killed, which I do not advocate for. But we will make mistakes along the way, and we will try to correct them. But we need to be very careful and record any changes we make to the genome. It needs to be well documented, and it needs to be understood to the fullest before we integrate them. And then, so tier 4, or stage 4, barrier 4, is going to be creating biological life forms for particular purposes. So this is either producing some kind of meat. I think as we go up these tiers, it gets more and more you're going to get more and more pushback from other people until we understand it fully. Creating entire biological life forms from scratch, it's a very scary prospect. And right now, we are nowhere near understanding the implications of it. And we're nowhere near, intuitively thinking about this as being something we're comfortable with. And I think that's going to take a lot of time. This is probably, decades, if not centuries away. So you remember, our relationship is to things and being, or not things, but to beings. That's one of the most important thing in when we're creating a life form like this. It will detach us from those beings. It'll make us look at them as if they're just a piece of utility. But as long as they are somewhere in the tiers of synthesis and are not a rationalized entity outside of it, it's hard to not look at it as, if it's between one of the other tiers, we need to treat all tiers as if they have meaning, not just, but obviously they have more meaning as they go up in tiers, which is weird. But it's like, when we have a relationship with other social beings, like, it's why we treat dolphins with so much respect and care, and like other animals like gorillas and other things that aren't necessarily like, chimpanzees I would say are pretty close with Lucifer, but like gorillas, they're very gentle creatures, and they're more of, I would say, God, like what we would conceptualize as what a godly type person would be. It's like that. Whereas the further you go down, the more just like cut and dry it is. Like single cellular organisms, do you think they have any care or connection with anything else? They just more or less do whatever for the sake of survival. There is no connection, no meaning, no relationship they have to anything else. But there is still some, because there is DNA incorporated inside of cells to ensure that they don't take over their environment. Because we've had many mass extinctions where life has tried to achieve an extreme, like one extremely dominant species or organism has flourished, and it's entirely changed the entire state of the world. And like humans are doing that right now. Like we are expanding our energy too fast for the environment to handle. But we're kind of rectifying that with electric vehicles and other forms of energy. We just need to be careful about the reasons why we're doing it. So if you're doing it for the sake of greed, if you're doing it for those things rather than for the sake of achieving homeostasis, then you're doing something wrong. And that's what a lot of people are doing. And they see that. It's like, I see you advocating for this because it's gaining you something. Not because you're trying to engage with a reciprocity with reality or with people, with beings, with society. Like you're not trying to engage in reciprocity. You're trying to absorb and grasp and take, which is of the left hemisphere. It's of addiction. It's of manipulation. It's all those things. So yeah, reciprocal relationship when we aim at in every endeavor and any synthesis of our creation is also our responsibility. So anything this is why we keep animals around that we don't necessarily provide us with utility anymore. It's because we still see the meaning in our responsibility to them, like horses. And it's the same reason why like people who are of that Luciferian liberal left mind do not really care for things that don't provide them with utility. It's like, why should I care about like horses? They don't do anything for our society. Well, it's like, guess what? They did for thousands of years. And in fact, they're the entire reason, one of the huge reasons why we have progressed as society. Because we've utilized horsepower to propel society into another stage of our progress. So the energy from horses allowed us to freed up some of our time to do other things. But it was a mutual exchange because we fed horses, we housed them, we progressed their survival. Okay, so then enhancing and or changing DNA for the sake of survival in context. Obviously, this one could be seen as like as a tier 3 as well. But this is very specific because we're doing this for the sake of survival, either spacefaring or on other planets. Like this wouldn't necessarily be something that happens in any current context. This is very context specific tier and barrier because it requires us to be in another planet, another context, another situation like Mars. Like we need to, instead of having a bunch of people die, let's manipulate our DNA so we can change our bone density and change our other aspects of our being to better fit that situation. So it's either that or we find some other means to do it. So those are really the choices we have to make, and that's going to take a collective effort because no one person can ever come up with the entire answer. It's got to be a negotiation. People need to talk about it, think about it for an extended period of time before these things are incorporated, because it could very well separate God from, and Lucifer could take control. It's like if our species is completely up to our rationalized choices of what should be the case, then there's something we're not taking into account. There's always going to be something that we can't take into account that will lead us to a bad decision. And we need to very carefully balance that, negotiate with, our understanding of everything, and figure out exactly how much information we need before we can make that decision. Let's see here. Okay. So I'm going to share this document in the description, my entire document, and everyone can read it whenever you like. And it's almost 300 pages now, so there's a lot to go through, and I need to eventually start to edit it much more. But the ideas and concepts keep flowing. But I feel like I'm 90% done. Like I'm getting the concepts and everything fleshed out, and I don't think there's too much more to go over. But as soon as I'm done with the concepts, I have to share it with the world, and I need people to understand it first, and I need people to give me pointers. Like everybody this needs to be a group effort, and I need other people to understand what I'm saying and give me feedback, because I'm not going to perfectly articulate everything, and I'm going to make mistakes, especially if I wrote 300 pages in a month. So I'm going to need everyone's help with this, especially when it comes to listing the true dichotomies. Like once you understand the framework, just list as many as you can. Feel free to comment on this document, because when I share it, you will be able to make comments. So if you have a comment on a particular section, if you have comments or even questions, like if you want to ask me a question like, hey, can you expand on this, or anything, any question, comment, anything, or just post it in the description below. Just whatever means necessary. I'm always available to anybody who's seeking the truth. And that's what I'm doing. I'm trying to seek the truth because I understand that there's a connection here that we've never had before. And I just want to expand upon it. And I know it's true. I just don't know how to perfectly articulate it. And I need other people's help. So whether you understand it or not, if you have any video ideas, if you have anything you want me to go over, feel free. Because like my dad was the one that wanted me to go over AI. And here you go. So this one's for you, Pops. And but I love you guys, and I'll see you guys in the next video. And I'm gonna start from synthesis and compromise. The tiers of synthesis and synthesis, and then compromise is part of that. So just like between God and every time Lucifer and God have a fight, they need to find a compromise between them to settle it. And it needs to be mutual exchange, or else it's not actually a compromise. And another way to think about this is just your relationship with your significant other. If you guys have roles that you can do, there's a few ways you can solve that. Either like for the dishes, either I can do the dishes one day, you can do the dishes the next day, or I can do the dishes this week, you can do the dishes the next week, or I can just do the dishes and you do something else, like you do the lawn, and that's how you come up with roles, because certain people are better at particular roles than others. And those compromises are they happen as a result of us being social creatures. Like that, gender roles, you can call them, or societal roles, or roles of a relationship, manifested as a result of us being tier 7 creatures. We have particular roles that we're suited for, and each sex has particular roles that they're favored in. So obviously it's not a universal truth, but it is a truth. And so I hope you guys are excited for synthesis and compromise, because I think it's one of the easiest things to digest in this entire document, I think, because it's very of the left hemisphere, and we're so ingrained in it these days that it's easy to understand. And I think, it's also the reason we have a left hemisphere. So I think it's going to tickle a lot of people's Luciferian brains and be easy to digest, because it's simple, it's structured, it's the reason we have all of our rationalizations of numbers, and it's all the sciences. So it incorporates everything that our left hemisphere loves so much about this world, the material aspect of reality and everything else. So, all right. Again, I love you guys, and I hope you have a great weekend.